Greetings, wannabe adventurer, and welcome to another episode of Bardic Quest D&D 101 here on the Bardic Quest YouTube channel. If you are new here, I am Wayne Ingram. I am a full-time dungeon master, a D&D enthusiast, and the DM here for Bardic Quest actual play here on our YouTube channel. Now, if you are a new player, this could be the video for you. You have a general understanding of the concept of how the game works. The DM describes what's going on, you describe how your player reacts, and then the DM adjudicates and narrates the outcomes. You get a basic understanding of that. But now you want to take a little bit of a deeper dive, and you want to understand a little bit more about what all the numbers on your character sheet might mean. Then this video, we are going to explain the basic ingredients of your D&D character, which are the 6 abilities, which you may have heard of before and are possibly trying to get a better understanding of what they're for and what they represent in your character. Your character then is made up of these 6 abilities. Everything else that your character is able to do is influenced by these abilities, and that is essentially what your character is made up of at its most basic level in Dungeons & Dragons. What are these 6 abilities? The first is Strength, which is representative of your physical might. The second is Dexterity, which represents your agility, your reflexes, and indeed your sense of balance. Then you have Constitution, which represents your general health and stamina. You have Intelligence, which represents your reasoning and your memory, your ability to recall information, for example. And then you have Wisdom, which represents your perceptiveness and your mental fortitude. So how much are you able to perceive the world, and indeed how much are you able to stave off attacks on your psyche, or indeed perhaps just attacks on your mental well-being. And finally then you have Charisma, which represents your confidence, your poise, and your charm. Very much your power of personality in every sense. Each character will have a score between 1 and 20 of each of these abilities, and that score is representative of how adept your character is at that particular ability. A score of 1, for example, is the lowest that an ability can go. 1 means very bad in that particular aspect. A constitution of 1 would imply that this is a very unhealthy individual. A score of 2 to 9 shows a weak capability. A strength, for example, of score of, say, 7 would imply that you're a little bit on the weak side. You're certainly not going to be able to hit things very hard, that's for sure. A score of 10 to 11 is representative of the human average. So if you see a score of 10 or 11 in anything, that means that you have average capabilities at it. You're not particularly bad at it, but you're also not particularly exceptional at it either. Any score between 12 and 19, however, represents a very strong capability. So if, for example, you had a dexterity of 15, that would mean that you're very agile, you've got very good reflexes, and probably very quick on your feet. And then a score of 20 is the highest a typical adventurer could go in any particular one of these ability scores. So it shows exceptional ability. So if you show a strength of 20, that implies that you are incredibly strong. Likewise, an intelligence score of 20 implies that you are incredibly smart and you're probably very knowledgeable on a lot of things. Sometimes rules and abilities will allow an ability score to actually exceed 20 to an overall maximum of a score of 30. In the event that you had a score of 21 to 29, this shows extraordinary ability, possibly moving towards slightly paranormal, extra-human, superhuman capabilities. If you had a strength score of 25, for example, you're probably exhibiting superhuman levels of strength, possibly even godlike levels of strength. Likewise, in terms of wisdom, incredible wisdom, perceiving things in the world that other people just can't comprehend. For example, that the normal human or humanoid wouldn't be able to comprehend, for example. And then finally, there is the absolute maximum score of 30, which is the absolute highest that a score can go. This very much is in godlike territory at this point when you hit a number of 30. So, that's all well and good. You understand the narrative purpose of these scores, but what do they actually mean when it comes to the game? Your ability scores affect your character's dice rolls by giving you an ability score modifier or an ability modifier. This modifier then is a number that you will apply to your D20 tests. So when you're rolling a 20-sided dice, which is usually the dice that you're going to roll when you're trying to determine whether or not you are successful at something, you will roll a 20-sided dice, a D20, and then you will apply this modifier. For example, if you were trying to break down a door, you would roll a single D20, giving you a roll of between 1 and 20, and then you would add your strength modifier. So let's say you had a strength score of 12. That will give you a modifier of +1, and we'll come to that in more detail in a moment. But in this case, you would roll your D20, perhaps it would give you a roll of a 15, you add your strength modifier of +1, which would give you a total roll of 16. And that could be the difference between an average person not succeeding versus somebody who was succeeding. The Dungeon Master might have set the target number, for example, at 16 to break down that door. If you had just taken the 15 that the dice had rolled, you wouldn't have broken down that door. Because you are particularly stronger than an average human, you add that +1, meeting the target number of 16, which would then mean that you could break down the door successfully. How do you work out what these modifiers are? There's a formula that you can use to help you generate those. So you take whatever the score is. So let's say an 18, you take 10 off of that score, which will give you 8, and then you divide that by 2, which should give you a +4 to that particular score. In the event that when you do the division, of dividing it by 2, that you get a fraction, so in this case 2.5, that 2.5 would then become 2, because you are rounding down. You don't round up to half fraction, you round down in Dungeons and Dragons. So that will give you a +2 in this particular instance. But if you can't be bothered to do that calculating and work out what those scores are, or those modifiers are, the Player's Handbook, it does actually provide a lovely table for you to reference if you'd rather do it that way, giving you what those modifiers are all the way from 1 to 30 on the score. 1 giving you a -5 modifier, because these can be negative. And this goes all the way up to a score of 30, which would give you a modifier of +10. So in the case of the door, if you rolled a 15, you'd add +10, which would give you an overall roll of 25, which is going to absolutely smash through the target number of 16, which would then make breaking down that door practically effortless for you. So that's how those ability scores work and what they're for, what they represent, and how you would apply them. We're going to go into a little bit more detail into D20 tests in another video, which is the main game mechanic that you will come to again and again as you run through a game of Dungeons and Dragons. So we're going to do a video on what D20 tests are, what different types of D20 tests there are, and also how they function as part of the overall game. So my friends, I hope you found that helpful in understanding what the 6 ability scores are in Dungeons and Dragons, what they represent, and I will catch you on the next video.